Keep inquisitive. Find what you really love doing and put yourself in the right room. And then have a crack at it. There's never the perfect time. So you find what you're good at, you build on that through study and putting yourself in the right room, and then you're actually able to sell yourself or to sell your business, all in the same way.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested.
Hi, freedom fighters. Now, how creative and innovative are you? How often do you have great ideas, but the hustle and bustle of everyday life gets in the way and the urgent drowns out the important, and those great ideas never come to fruition? And what do you think of others who appear to come out of nowhere and achieving? You admire them on one side, but are secretly frustrated, regretful, and disappointed with yourself on the other. So what separates the best from the rest? Because we're entering a time when the same old is not likely to be effective. We all need to get more creative and innovative. And as you'll hear today, innovation doesn't have to be huge or groundbreaking to make a difference. But the important difference between great ideas and innovations is implementation, making it happen. Because inspiration and innovation without constant and relentless implementation, backed by resilience, is nothing. Dreams are only dreams until they become a reality. And relentless dedication to the implementation of innovation is what sets achievers apart. Passion's one thing, but passion and purpose mean nothing without process and procedures. It's imagination and innovation combined with constant implementation where the rubber really hits the road. You need to be constantly questioning everything by testing the edges from the small to the large. You need to keep asking yourself, how can we do it differently and better? What can I invest in today that will improve our tomorrows? Now, you've heard me talk a lot about developing the art of two-eye seeing, a parallel perspective where one eye is focused on tomorrow while your other eye focuses on today, where your today eye focuses on income and work while your tomorrow eye focuses on investment and wealth. And at the intersection of this dual top-down and bottom-up approach, you get to enjoy it all. Where your immediate job, your work or your business creates the income that lubricates the pistons and wheels of your future engine of wealth. And today we get to enjoy the perfect example of someone who brings these parallel perspectives together, where his single-minded and relentless and resilient passion has created profit and prosperity for his extended family and community. I'm talking about the much celebrated Stephen J. Hunt, who's the founder of Hunt Hospitality, that now owns 7 pubs worth over $100 million. And he's a winner of a stack of prestigious awards, including the New South Wales Business Outstanding Business Leader. And he's been a finalist in the Australian Financial Review's Most Innovative Businesses in Australia and New Zealand award. On top of this, he's become a private fund manager with over $100 million under management and has over 300 staff. So how's he managed to achieve all this? Well, as he says in his great new book, Find, Build, Sell, saying it like that makes it sound like it was easy to achieve. It wasn't. It's taken him 30 years to learn the formula for how to find, build, and scale a bricks and mortar business. In the early days, he made many mistakes. In fact, he made so many that he nearly went bankrupt before he'd even begun. Stephen started out making $100 in his backyard bar and gradually worked his way up, managing bars all over Sydney, London, and Europe, working for some of the biggest and best names in the business. He was a sponge, absorbing everything around him, just waiting for that day when he could do it for himself and be his own boss. So to unpack what it takes to find, reinvigorate, and get invested in your passion so that you can turn it into profit, We're privileged to have Stephen Hunt join us on the podcast today. So welcome, and let's get invested, Stephen.
Thanks, Bushy. Thanks for having me.
Mate, really looking to diving into this subject, and it's a subject that revolves around a passion of yours and many people in Australia, and that's pubs. But mate, for those that don't know who you are, can you give us a quick rundown on what you do differently, and more importantly, why you do what you do, mate?
Well, yeah, so I'm a fund manager by default. Initially, I was a publican, and I focus on hospitality businesses on the north coast of New South Wales. And I guess what makes me different is we have such a heavy focus on the people. And once we realise that we've got the good people in our teams, they make the processes, and then that makes us profitable. So our I guess a significant aim or direction for our business is making sure we have good people surrounding us, and people that are willing to have a crack. And I guess that's probably the significant difference for me is that we're so people focused.
Yeah, okay. And what about the why part? Why do you do what you do, mate?
Oh, I love it. I love creating an atmosphere. I love the environment that you can create. I love it when people come into your pub and there's music playing, or there's people in a function room, celebrating or commiserating, there's sport on the telly, and then beautiful smell of, food coming from the bistro, just floating out the flavours. And when the pub has that hum, that's the thing that I love the most, is that people are doing what they want to be doing, even if it's commiserating. If people are having a wake and they need to get things off their chest, we're happy to create that environment for people. So for why, I guess, is just because I love it.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Well, what I'd love to do now, if you don't mind, is sort of go back and do a bit of a Reader's Digest on your journey so far. And you talk in your book about your rollicking and rowdy life, mate. So I'd love for you to break down, where have you invested your time and energy and money over the years, and why, and how has this led to where you are and what you're doing today, mate? Yeah,
well, by background, I guess you consider me as a bit of a jock, and played a lot of rugby and rugby league and rugby union, a lot of contact sports. In terms of the rowdy part, quite often, even though I'm not a very big bloke, I'd find myself in situations where I'd have to take on a sub-role of security, or quasi-role. And probably one of the funniest rowdy bits was I was living in the UK, and I'd gone into work on a day off, and I was chatting to a few of my locals. Just thought, I'll have a beer, and I saw a couple of scruffy-looking blokes sitting in the corner of the pub, and it was, one bar operation. It wasn't a big, classic sort of English pub, nice timber floors and timber around the walls, and it was a good pub. Anyway, I was looking at these scruffy guys, and I said to the barmaid, just keep your eye on these guys because they look a bit out of order, but if there's any issues, I'm just standing over there with the locals. Anyway, they've come up to the bar and approached the barmaid, and she said, look, you guys have had too much to drink, and it's time to move on. Anyway, they got pretty upset, and a few expletives were thrown around, and I looked at one of my mates who was a big buffy Queenslander, great guy, and we thought, right, these guys better go. So there was a bit of a process into what we did, because we had to do it a fair bit, where you basically move all the glasses out of the way and anything that can be used as a weapon, really. And so he's done that, and then he's gone and opened the front doors, and I've grabbed both of these fellas and basically, using reasonable force, removed them from the premises out onto the sidewalk. And then I've gone back inside and, dusted off the hands, and then gone back to my pint. And one of the girls in the pub said, well, that was pretty brave. And I was like, well, why is that? She goes, well, that was Oasis. And I had no idea who they were, like literally. Like where we lived at the time, we didn't have a TV. So we had music playing, but I'd heard them, but I didn't know who they were. And so when I came back to Australia, I was talking to my cousins at Christmas time, and I said, have you guys heard of this band called Oasis? And they were like, yeah, come and listen to this. I said, I've heard the songs before. I didn't know who they were. And they were like, why, what happened? And I said, they're in the pub one day, and we literally threw them out on the street. And they were like, that's the biggest rock band in the world at the moment. How did you not know? I said, well, I just didn't know. So Got to be careful. Got to be careful who you mess with. It's better to know who you're dealing with. But mind you, I probably wouldn't have done it any differently because, as far as I'm concerned, they were just being pigs. So, so that was one of the experiences I had.
They had a bit of a reputation, I think, for trashing hotels, motels, planes, you name it, mate. So you probably did the right thing by grabbing them by the ear and showing them the street.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't even know how they do that because they're not exactly the biggest fellas in the world. I mean, they do have fantastic music, but they should really just stick to that, I think. So, yeah, so that was one example of and then, I learned a lot when I was overseas. I met some really nice people and realised how little money I was earning. So I came back to Australia and started studying, and it was less than a week after I finished some study that I took over the licenseeship of a pub, which was what I was studying, and obviously I had a lot of experience. And then that sort of evolved, and I got more experience and joined associations and got a bit more confidence, and then bought a bigger pub and then continued on, and that was with my family. So I sort of continued on. I was the manager and they were all accountants, and that was in Newcastle. So they were based in Sydney.
Yep.
And then was seconded to work for a private equity firm that had 20 pubs across Australia. So I was running the ones in the Newcastle and Hunter region. And it kind of got me it did get me have an education on how multiple venues really work. So it was a few years later that I did some more study, and then I had a real estate property in Sydney that I used to live in, a residential property, and I sold that and had $400,000 in the kitty. And then I was like, hang on, I'm going to use this to buy a pub. So that was in July, and I actually went to my old boss's investment meeting. He said, come along. I said, yeah. So I was sitting there with a lot of high net worth individuals, and I'm kind of looking around the room, and then I'm looking at the design of the investment vehicle that they had. I was kind of like, I've read something similar to this before, and I think if I can do what they're doing and merging it into something else, that I may be able to eventually buy a pub. So I did. But the mistake I had made was I spoke to a lot of investors, designed an IAM, made sure corporation law was all ticked off on. And, a lot of investors said, yep, we'll be on board. So I signed the contract, and it was a very stupid thing to do in hindsight, but it actually gave the pressure for me to actually find the investors. So we had the bank lined up, and they were prepared to give us 70% LVR, which was huge at the time.
Mm.
And all the investors who said, yeah, we're on board, a lot of them just vanished. And so I was left with one day to raise the funds, and I had to raise over $1 million. And so I went to the first investor meeting, and I was really pumped. I exercised and tried to sort of get focused on what I could produce. And so the first investor was like, yep, we're on board. And then I went to the next investment meeting, and those two investors came on board. So I only had to nail really one last meeting. And, obviously I was pretty nervous, but what got me through it was focusing on what I was good at, which was running pubs. And the fun side of it, I knew if I was making the pubs profitable and had the right advice, then the fun side of it kind of would take over itself. And so, yeah, finally nailed it and got the investors that I wanted and raised over $1 million in the day. So that's where I would have gone bankrupt, because I would have been sued for $4 million if I didn't complete. So a lot of lessons learned in that process. And then, so the fund was worth 4.2, revalued 6 months later at 5, revalued at the end of the year at 6. Then my investor said, well, let's get some more pubs. So I bought 2 more pubs. So went from 4.2 mil to 20-something mil within 12 months. And that's when we had to basically get a trustee and change the vehicle a little bit, investment vehicle.
Yeah.
And then things just steamrolled. A few of the pubs we bought early, like one of them we sold for 6.5, paid 4.2 for it. Another one we sold for 16. Within a reasonable time frame. So we just got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And kind of now where we're up today. And I'm pretty happy with it because there's no pressure to grow. you kind of get to a comfortable position. So our fund's ticking along really well, and really happy to have such great investors. Last 7 years, I think the returns have been around 15%. Part of that's cash, and then part of that's the growth. So it's a pretty good result, so pretty happy how we're tracking at the moment.
No, it's a massive result in a very short space of time. And but what it belies to some degree is the years of hard work that you put in before you got to that point of transitioning from sort of pub owner and fund manager at the same time. And from the readings, it looks like it all started in your $100 backyard beer garden, mate. Can you sort of give us a rundown on why pubs were, why has it been your passion, and how did that $100 that you made in your folks' backyard beer garden then lead you into such a strong career in both the hotels and fund management space?
Well, it started when I was 4, and I did my first transaction, which was selling some Lego to my neighbour. And he knocked on the door one day, and we'd played Lego together for years. He was a couple of years older than me, and he said, "I want to buy your Lego." And I said, "Oh, you beauty, if I sold my Lego, I'd buy heaps of lollies." And so I was about to sell him the box of Lego. It was all mixed, Space Invaders and a whole lot of different other varieties of TV shows thrown in there. And my mum said, just wait, you may be able to sell it for more than the box. You might be able to sell it piece by piece. And so I was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, I'll charge, 20 cents a piece. She goes, no, because he can go down the road and sell it. He can buy it for less. So I then was like, oh, okay, I'll charge him this amount. So it taught me about pricing and market prices, and so he did buy it, and I bought heaps of lollies, and that was good for my teeth and for my waistline. But, when you're 4, you don't really care, do you? So, and then jumping forward a few years later, my dad had been successful in a business transaction. And I walked past him in the hallway at home, and he said, "Oh, have a look at this," and he had a cheque for a substantial amount of money, and I was like, wow. And all I knew was that he had a company. So I was like, right, I think I was 8 by then. I was like, I'm going to have a company. That's what I'm going to do. And I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters, loads of aunts and uncles, loads of cousins. So we used to get together in the backyard at our place, like a lot of families. And I soon realised that I loved being in that environment where there are lots of people around and people having a good time, and like classic cousins, arguing over nothing and things in the past. And that then, like a classic 16-year-old, my parents would drive down the driveway on holiday, and I'd be left at home with one of my older siblings, and then my mates would drive up the other side, and we'd have parties. We'd have up to 100 people there, and as we got older, the teachers would come into the parties and have a good time with the students, and we'd have music playing, and we'd have, jocks and nerds and girls from the netball team, and, so it was a really nice mix of people. And how I raised $100 was had a whole lot of beers in the fridge that I needed to get rid of pretty quickly. So what do? You have another party. So we had a party, and then sold all the beers, and then, the next day my parents came home and everything was nice and neat and tidy. Actually, one of the funniest things was there was a development going on over the back fence, and the developer he bought a house and was redoing it, so he demolished the property, and we threw all of the beer cans, glass bottles over the back fence, and thinking that he'd just throw them, in the big skip bin with the lot. And that was all fine until the fence fell over. And what was exposed was all of these cans and bottles and, empty packets of cigarettes, food scraps. And my mum and dad got home and said, was that yours? And I was like, oh, no, of course not. It must have been the builders. Anyway, not long after school, I got a job in the local pub. I just got a huge amount of experience and was working for some of the best publicans in Australia. Yeah. Which, as an 18-year-old, you don't really realise. You just go, oh, well, it's just a job. But some of those processes I still use now. They're some of the most successful processes I have. So, it was certainly a very interesting start to my career.
It certainly was, mate. Tell me, that's something I'd like to dig into a little bit because, even the idea or the awareness of setting up a private equity investment fund for most people would be just way beyond their scope of imagination. Some people might go, oh, yeah, but I love working in pubs, I'll own a pub. But to take that massive leap from owning a pub to doing it via a private equity investment fund, it's certainly something beyond most people's stratospheres. What was it that opened your eyes to that? It's relatively, I mean, I know you'd been in the industry for many years by the time you got around to that exercise, but tell us, I'd love for you to break down how that came about. You sort of touched on the fact that the guy you used to work for had done a similar exercise, but take us through that process in terms of the awareness, the idea, and how you brought that to fruition, because that's not an easy thing to do.
Well, I think it was, so I was late to study. Like I did diploma in hospitality management when I was quite young. And then probably when I was about 40, maybe, 49 now, although a lot of people say I look a lot younger, but not really. It's more the other way. I started doing a Master's of Business, and I was actually doing it on the train because I didn't have much time. So it was through the study that I actually got the ideas about the equity firms.
Yeah.
But being a person like everyone, you're running around and keeping busy and you're having a family. And I thought I've got to process this information quickly. So I learned how to speed read and touch type because I knew that I needed to download the information and then get it into my head pretty much.
Yep.
So then I started studying the Masters of Business, and I was doing that on the train, and then effectively a lot of that stuff sunk in. And then when I decided to set up the fund, I looked back to my old boss and was like sort of observing what he was doing and observing what people were doing in the hospitality sector. And, it was a lot of it was sinking in, but there wasn't a full-on intention to do it at this stage, but because I was really enjoying the learning process.
Yeah.
And then finally, when I just kept looking around and then decided to set up the fund, obviously got a good lawyer and a good accountant, which are always really, really important. And then I realised, okay, what's going to make people invest in me as opposed to, real estate or the stock exchange or, many other things they could invest in. I thought, well, I've got to provide a greater return. And then I actually have to see what people want to invest in. So that's what I did, and then basically set up the fund with the right sort of information memorandum. And then that flowed on to, finding the right pub and then stupidly signing the contract. But it was kind of a process that had been building for a long time. And also the fact that I'd worked for some of the biggest breweries in the world when I was in the UK, sort of, those little things as you're grinding away, they're sort of all absorbing into your head. You just kind of, and that process with the brewery and how they operate at multiple venues as well. And, obviously they were listed. So all of those things contributed to the establishment of the fund.
Yeah, and I love it, mate. But as I sort of said in the intro, it's one thing to be aware of it. It's a very different thing to do it. Is it just been in your DNA to get in and have a crack? Because a lot of people would talk about it, doing it, but would never actually get around to it. If you sort of look back on your life so far, where is this ability just to get in and have a go come from, do you think?
Part of it was from a bad experience. So when I was younger, I played a lot of rugby league and rugby union. Yeah. And I missed out on a couple of opportunities through a bit of self-sabotage, really, on, taking it to the next level in terms of turning professional. And for years, that really, really annoyed me. That was something that, that sort of burnt. And then as I got more experience in the business world and different investments, not really big ones, because I couldn't really afford to, but then that was the turning point for me. Was I'm just sick of this. I've got to have a go. I'm just sick of working for other people. I'm sick of what I did to myself in the past. And I just thought, right, I'm just going to really rip in and have a crack, which is what I used to do on the sporting field. You know what I mean? I think part of the reason why I was reasonably good at sport was because I just went, right, I'm just going to have a go at this.
Yeah.
So that it still burns when I think about it. I have to let it go. When I watch my boys play sport, I just try and enjoy it and try and encourage them in certain ways, and even my daughters as well. But, that was kind of one of those things. Also, too, a lot of people who came into the pubs were the middle management whingers who thought they could tell everyone what to do. And I was looking at them going, there's no way I'm going to end up being a person who's that age and hasn't actually had a crack at it.
Yeah. Well said, mate. That's a pretty good motivator. Mate, you've mentioned a couple of times already sort of informal mentors that you've had along the journey. How important have mentors been to your success, and who are they and how they help, if you can break that down for us?
Yeah, in terms of they're crucial. I've always said and learnt this over the years, you have to put yourself in the right room. And sort of people go, well, and, I ended up at Harvard a couple of times, did a few courses over there, and probably a lot of the listeners are like, well, I can't afford to go there, and, I'd be a bit anxious in going and putting myself in that environment. And that's all true, but it didn't just come randomly. So that came about through initially joining my local Chamber of Commerce, which costs you nothing.
Yep.
And then I actually joined the industry associations and was secretary of the Australian Hotels Association for a number of years for the Hunter sub-branch, which was the largest in New South Wales. So then, again, I met more people. And it was one of those things that just it's linked to putting into the community, because neither of them at the time I thought this is a great networking opportunity. I literally just thought, well, I've got to give a bit back. And I'm not going to be, like I said earlier, I'm not going to be one of those people that whinges about things. Like, I want to make a difference. If something's not right, I just want to fix it or try to. And in terms of the mentors, I had Greg Maitland. He's a phenomenal guy. He's got an independent pub group in South Australia. He's just a great guy. Could bring him up. Might not talk to him for 2 years and then ring him up and go, hey, mate, how about having a crack at this? Or what are your thoughts on that? And he has been so helpful. The Bayfield family, who owns some really big hotels in New South Wales. So it was a great experience working for them. I've had some great teachers over the years. One of the guys who I met at Harvard, we had a 5-minute discussion, and I think that helped me raise $2 million. So they're everywhere you need to look at them. It can just be a discussion with someone, that you pick up an idea on. So that's like a very cheap way of learning, having a mentor. They're the suggestions. You don't have to have all the money in the world to have a good mentor and to put yourself in the right room.
Yeah, and I guess what goes hand in hand with that is not being scared to ask a question of someone.
Oh, for sure. And since writing my book, I've had loads of people contact me. Quite a few people in New Zealand, a couple of people in Singapore, people from Germany, lots of Australians who just sort of want a little bit of a tip here or there. It's great, they're always very polite, and I'm happy to help them. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's that leap of faith of just asking the question, and then your confidence grows. Every little win just sort of rolls you along to the next win, and then you've got to have humble confidence, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Now, just as a quick aside, while we're on the subject of mentors, if you're listening and you want to ensure that you're optimizing your investment approach, either as a first-time investor or an existing investor who's struggling to make it work, feel free to join me on a bushy blockbuster for an hour of power to talk with me personally on any questions, queries, or issues that you'd like to discuss. So just click on the link in the show notes or jump on knowhowproperty.com.au, hit the purple book appointment button in the top right-hand corner, then click on the Pathway Finder option, and our team will be in touch to book you in to your preferred time for just $295 odd bucks. You can ask me anything you want on property, finance, or investment strategy for a full 60 minutes. So back to the exercise, mate. Very few people, I think, just realise how grunty being involved in the hotel world can be. It's pretty much a 24/7 exercise if you're up to the eyeballs in it. And I know from some of my Google stalking that you've had ADHD over the journey. Which so has that been an inhibitor or an accelerator, do you think, in your achievements to date?
I think it has been really good for me.
Yeah.
Actually, in fact, I was trying some medications which I've just gone off because, and I wouldn't recommend that to anyone else. You obviously have to do it in consultation with your doctor. But because I was they were actually making me feel quite angry, they were. And it didn't slow me up, but it obviously helped with concentration. But I had a good chat to my wife, and she was like, I don't think it's making you a better person or it's having the result you need. So I just stopped taking it. And in terms of it being a superpower, sure has, because my brain is very creative and just not really by choice, it just bounces around. You probably notice in this interview sometimes I don't really answer a question because my brain just goes off into something else pretty quickly. But I think it's been really good, and the team around me obviously are very aware of it. So when we're looking at projects, they know we want to get it done, and we want to get it done quickly because otherwise I've moved on to the next one. And they're very good. I call them the executioners. They know what to do. They get it done quickly, and then they go, Steve, are we pulling the trigger on this? I think that's a really good thing, getting that right team around you. No, I actually enjoy it. I kind of enjoy who I am, and
yeah, it's great. But I think because I've had similar issues years ago, I just couldn't switch off. I was always on, but it can be pretty tough on relationships, mate. So how do you sort of balance the act between this sort of need to be wanting, be across everything that's going on, but still being able to spend time with your partner and the family and enjoy quality time there? How have you managed that?
Well, I think, like everyone says, you've got to get that balance. So for me, in the mornings, I have a bit of a routine where I plan and I read and then I meditate and then I exercise and I do a bit of journaling as well. And those really, really help me keep centered. They help me sleep. They help me, stay focused as much as I can. I love the exercise bit, still love those endorphins.
Yeah.
And the reading is great. I read a lot of books about Stoicism, which I find really, really good. And so getting all of those things right actually helps you sort of put you in the eye of the storm. You get a little bit calm even though there's a lot of things happening around you.
Yeah.
That really works for me.
Yeah, I'm right with you, mate. The exercise routine for me is a must. In fact, I become a very grumpy bastard if I don't exercise every day. Mate, what's something unique or interesting about you that you haven't shared publicly before?
I think there's lots of things. I think my awesome dog is a hunting dog. Actually, he's mentioned in my book. But anyway, I love spending time with him. I've got 4 acres where I live, or I don't know how many hectares that is, a bit old school. But and I love doing the old ride-on, listening to a podcast like yours and cruising around in the backyard. And the self-satisfaction from that is huge. I'm sure people have said I've done interesting things, but the really simple things is what I enjoy doing most, cruising around with my dog. It's quite funny. He sits next to me when I do my meditation and reading out the front of my house on my rocking chair. And he looks out and he thinks I'm looking at things, so he looks where I'm looking, being a hunting dog, and where he's going to pounce. So I do like spending time with the old. He's a very good dog. He's Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg. Yeah.
I've met Snoop Dogg.
I love your reference in the book to, the epigenetics, where, you sort of hunt by name and hunt by nature. And they often say that the dogs we choose are a reflection of ourselves, mate, and you've got a hunting dog. So it all makes pretty much sense in terms of being the pub hunter that you've actually become. So, no, that's awesome, mate. Tell me then, if you look back on your life so far, what's been the most challenging event that's brought about your greatest learnings and your best changes, do you think?
It would be a significant court case we had that caused a lot of stress and anxiety, but we ended up winning, which was really good. But that was a life-altering experience for me because of just, the time spent, and it was quite interesting. So I believe it was July 2015.
Yep.
I'm trying to work it backwards from when my son was born.
Yep.
No, it's July 16. So we found out that my wife was pregnant with, had 2 girls at that stage, and then we found out we were pregnant again, which was really exciting.
Yeah.
The second thing we found out pretty much on the same day was when the court case was being set. And the third thing was I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So those 3 things, one of them absolutely joyful, but the other 2 extremely stressful. But learning from both, learning from the experience of going to court and the inner workings of the justice system, which we ended up winning, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And then the Crohn's was like, you got to look after your body. You know, you got to manage things well and really look after yourself. So all invaluable lessons. And then we had the beautiful baby boy, and he's, my 5 kids are marrying my wife is the number 1, and then the 5 kids are all number 2.
Yeah, love it, mate. Mate, I like to talk a lot about living by design, where you sort of get clear on exactly how you want to live, and then the steps that you take day by day are taking you close to what that is. Can you paint us a bit of a picture of your life vision and your ideal lifestyle?
Yeah, I think my vision came about was always to have multiple venues, and a side of that helps me get to that is making sure we look after the day-to-day really well. And you often hear people, talk about the 1%ers, but it's true. People say don't sweat the small stuff, and maybe I'm getting that wrong, but I think you should.
Yeah.
So that takes care of my growth strategy, because if we look after that, create a good environment for our customers, then that makes sure we make more money and then obviously invest in it and grow. So multiple venues I love doing and can see myself doing for many, many years. In terms of lifestyle I absolutely love it. Now where I live, I love the fact that you don't have to worry about how much you're spending on groceries. I think that's a great realisation. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to look at it and go, I'm not going to have that butter. I can only afford that.
Yeah.
The butter budget, we call it. But
the butter budget.
Yeah, having ourselves in that position is great for me and the family. It takes off a lot of pressure, and then even when you do have those budgets, it's a great learning curve, because you've got to have your budgets in your business, right? So you just learn how to get things done with what you have.
Yeah, I love that. And I as we talked about briefly off air, the sort of multi-venue strategy is almost an inbuilt diversification exercise, where you're not totally reliant on one thing to generate your income. And I'd love your thoughts on this as well, because what I've found once I got to the point where we enjoyed financial freedom, there's a weight off your shoulders that you can't put a price on in terms of how it improves your outlook on life. Did you experience the same thing when you got to that point?
Yeah. It's just the decrease of, like you said, weight off your shoulders. That decrease of stress. And you know what? I mean, who knows how long it lasts? So you've always got to be a little bit cautious. But that then, makes you feel a lot more relaxed. So when you do look at new investments, it's not the be-all and end-all. Do you know what I mean? You just kind of go, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I don't get this deal done. There's always going to be another deal. So you're not as anxious in terms of the business world. And then obviously that flows onto family life. If you want to go and have a holiday, my wife's Irish, so we try and get there a bit. And not having to go, right, well, how many credit cards are we going to balance this across? So.
Yeah. But tell us about your investment strategy then, in terms of, what you have and will continue to invest in alongside your multiple venue approach to continue to maintain that lifestyle, mate.
Well, what we do is we have a multifactor model that we use, and each topic is weighted. So, for instance, we have we look at the demographics of an area, we look at the DAs approved, we look at the competition and the mix of trade, who's employed in the area, and the staffing skills that you need to make this business survive, and then potential upside to that. And if we get a score of, say, 75, then we'll dig deeper into the the due diligence, looking at all the figures, etc. But we may even look at it at 75 if we believe we can get it up to be over an 80, 85.
Yep.
And two of the really simple things are high street location, being where there's a lot of foot traffic and even like nighttime traffic. So there was a business that we looked at, just as an example, and it had all of the boxes ticked in terms of location, had a car park, good demographics, shops surrounded by shops, but all of the shops shut at 5.
Yeah.
And so you had no nighttime trade, not you, but the business. Whereas another one we have is surrounded by restaurants and cafes, so it's open late, so people are there all day, every day.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, just an example of really looking hard into the businesses that you're looking at. So, and also too, if we really were keen on that business, we'd be like, righto, how can we get involved in the Chamber of Commerce and stimulate more trade in the area? So, I guess that's a multi-factor model that we work off, and if something fits in that, and if it doesn't, we don't pursue it. We just go, righto, well, we've got to make decisions that are going to get our investors a good return. So if it's too hard, it's going to be too tight, we're not interested.
Yeah, I love it. Can you share with us the story around the Newcastle pub where an apartment development opportunity emerged that completely changed the face of that exercise?
Yeah, there was. There's a couple of those. I think there was one about one of the major banks was building around the corner from one of the businesses we looked at, and so that just brought in a couple of thousand people into the area, which we knew that if we treated them well, that this would become their local, and not even just for booze, but just for coming in for lunch, and then that sort of leads into the old bums on seats, because people like going into a busy place.
Yeah.
So we got in touch with those guys as soon as they moved in and made sure that they were very welcome. In fact, I heard of a really, really good similar scenario of a really nice pub in the centre of Sydney, and it was a similar story. One of the senior banks had moved in, but what they actually did was dropped off, a couple of cases of champagne and said, welcome, we're across the road. And I thought that was a great tool to sort of get loyal patronage. So those little things, it could just be a welcome card. It doesn't have to be the bottle of champagne or whatever else it is, especially for people who don't have the budgets.
Yeah, no, beautifully said, mate. So I know that, pubs are what's different about them, I guess, is it's bricks and mortar, but it has a whole, you've got a number of businesses under the roof of one business as a consequence. How important has the property investment piece been, and how important is property to you in terms of your ongoing investment strategy?
Well, you're right about the different sort of, I guess, departments under the one roof. You've got a restaurant, you've got a bar, you might have some gaming, you've got a function room, you've got accommodation, you've got a bottle shop. So you kind of have to be on top of all of those and the industry standards. And in terms of the real estate component of it, it's the multiple uses for that particular site. So we had a bit of success with the business that we bought in the centre of Newcastle, and it was 2,000 square metres, and it had 2 street frontages. In fact, it was a better development site than it was pub.
Yep.
So we did a survey before we bought the site, and we worked out that you could get 130 apartments on this particular site, which with car parking. And so we were like, well, this is a good development site, but it has a pub on it. So I guess the real estate side of that is you have, the land and the potential for the 130 apartments. And then the pub side of it was you have a pub to sell that has X amount of gaming machines, accommodation. So we actually sold it to a gentleman who leased the property while he was getting the development applications through. And unfortunately, he wasn't very good at running a pub side, did a terrible job, and then didn't put his DA development applications in, and then sold the land, which is now vacant. So it was kind of sad because that was hard slog as a pub. Like, we had to spend a fair bit of money on it to get it up to speed.
Yeah.
But then as a sale, we sold it for like 80% more than what we paid for it. So
Brilliant.
So I guess that combines both, real estate and pub.
Yeah, it's one of those rare exercises where the business and the real estate go hand in hand. Now, if you sort of look back across the journey so far, Stephen, what would you say has been both your best and your worst investment, and what have you learned from each of them?
Probably the best and worst was the one we just spoke about, actually. It was a bad decision at the time, but it ended up being really good. Yeah, that's a combination of the both. The other was the reason why we ended up in court was because I had a pretty substantial argument with the authorities. And so but from every circumstance, from every loss, it basically, there's always some kind of win. Do you know what I mean? And obviously if you can keep trading, that's good, but it's always the learning experience. So, that's invaluable. But also, if you can learn from other people's mistakes, it makes it a little bit less stressful.
Yeah, exactly right. So if you were to sort of sum up your definition of sustainable success, and I underline the word sustainable there, mate, how are you achieving it, and how can others?
I kind of have a bit of succession planning within my own business. So that my team have buy-in, we're working on them actually physically buying in more. So we have so what that does is frees me up for more time and for them to take more responsibility with the business. So that sort of, I guess, is the key for me, and ensuring that you have young people around you who are smart so that you can mentor them. It keeps that sustainability going. And I guess we don't employ rock stars, so we've got very resilient team who just dig in when it's tough, and that certainly helped us with COVID. So really it's, succession planning and having the right people around you.
Yeah, beautifully said. It's something that people don't put enough energy into in getting the right people on board. But I want to sort of pivot now into your great book, Find, Build, Sell, because I've taken the time to have a read, and it really does, in a nutshell, hit on the head some of the key things that people need to be doing if they're going to achieve any level of success in whatever they're doing. Can you give us a rundown on, why you wrote it, and given how busy you are, mate, and I haven't written a couple of books myself, I know how long it takes to write the damn things. So why did you write it? What are the key messages, and who's it best suited for, do you think?
Well, I wrote it because I was doing a presentation in Vegas in 2020 that got cancelled because of COVID. So I've written down a lot of interesting things that had happened in my life, including that raising $1 million in a day. So it got the hospitality expo people in Vegas saying, well, why don't you come and do a presentation? So I threw down a lot of words preparing for that. And in hindsight, it was probably good that it got cancelled, because I ended up doing this year and I was far better prepared for it. So it probably would have been a disaster 2 years ago if I had done the presentation. So and then when I got home and it was cancelled, I just started expanding on it. And then I spoke to an editor who said, oh, just give me the headlines. And she was like, right, I'm happy to come on board and help you with this. So probably took, well, it's a lifetime of experience, but probably took me 1,000 hours to put it together. And when I was discussing the angle of it, the aim really was just to help people, just to help people. At the end of each chapter, there's a bit of a summary that people can read and have a bit of a look at.
Yeah.
So, there's tips for them. So I'm, happy to sort of put back in and do that sort of mentoring for people, because I don't really want them to go through some of the tougher times that I had. And if they can follow some of the path that I've worn down, well, that's a good thing in general. You know what I mean? That's good to put back in the community. It's probably good for the business community as well, because you get a whole lot of entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, as we discussed before, who then can kind of go, okay, I can use some of this, and I can, some of this is relevant, some of it isn't. So that's why, and that's sort of the time frame that it took to get it done. I'd get up a little bit earlier and scribble things down for a couple of hours each morning, and then put it in a timeline, put it in Excel. Coming from a family of accountants, they love that. That's pretty much how and why I did it.
Yeah, I'd love for you to break down the key elements of the find, the build, and the sell, because there's some great questions that you ask in each of those subjects that a lot of people don't even get around to asking themselves, mate. So can you sort of give us a quick breakdown on each of those three components?
Yeah, sure. So the find section of the book is really finding what you're truly passionate about. And, I mean, that's crucial. You want a job which you enjoy each day. There's always challenges. There's no such thing as a perfect job. But as soon as you realise that and you're enjoying what you're doing, then that's sort of step one. And look, it may be with the same people you're working with. And you never know by asking your boss, say, look, I want to get involved in this part of the business, the opportunities that may be there. So you don't have to end up being your own boss. And then you build on that, so you work out how to pitch yourself as the right person for that job, or pitching to the customers, to your customers or to your investors. So that's the building is also the confidence. You're building your confidence and you're thinking about your successes. And then the sell component is being actually able to, like the find bit, go to your boss and say, mate, I'm ready. I've done the study in marketing. I really believe I can contribute to this marketing team. And if you're like me, I just say to that particular team member, show me what you got. And then you've got to sell that bit. And as for the bricks and mortar, it's presenting your business in such a way that it's sellable to as many people, or in my case, as many publicans as possible. So you find what you're good at, you build on that through study and putting yourself in the right room, and then you're actually able to sell yourself or to sell your business all in the same way.
Yeah, I love that, mate. So if it's looking at the converse of that, what are the biggest mistakes that you see others making when it comes to their work, their business, their money, and their investing in that sense?
Growing too fast, getting out of control growth and then realising, hang on, I've got to manage multiple businesses now. That's always the downside. Investing in things that they have no idea about. I always believe that up until you get to a certain point, you should just be investing in things that you know about. Yeah, they're probably the two. And then, blind optimism. Wow. So many people get into a business that they don't end up doing successfully in because they just go, no, I'll be right. I'll get through it. Or, they buy a cafe that 5 people have owned before them and never been successful with. They go, oh, no, but I'll do this differently. It's like, pretty sure everyone who went in there was doing their best.
Mate, I've seen a lot of restaurants and restaurant owners over the years who have come to us to assist them in financing those ventures, who are picking up an existing venue and saying exactly that. No, I'll do it bigger, better than anyone else has. And 2 years later, they're on the bones of their backside and going out the back door. It's you're absolutely spot on around that sort of blind optimism piece and the real need to do proper due diligence around that. But I'd love for you to unpack some of the the key principles, systems, and procedures that you use quickly and easily to unlock value in yourself, others, and any business mate that you talk about in the book.
The principles, I guess, one of them for me really is just head down, arse up. And look for every opportunity. So the principles, obviously, firstly, find the right people around you. But in terms of yourself, you're not going to get anywhere without hard work. It's tenacity, and it keeps you working a lot and observing things. I walk into a cafe or a restaurant, and there isn't a time where I don't pick up something new I can do in my own business. So you've just got to be a sponge to everything and then be prepared to make sacrifices and do the hard yards while remaining sane if you can.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book that timing is everything and a critical element of when to buy and sell something. Can you expand on what you mean by this for us?
Yeah, for sure. So everything, as you know, like with lower interest rates, people can get a greater yield, you know what I mean? Or like, for instance, commercial at the moment, the yield is lower, so the multiple of that business is a lot higher because people are paying lower interest rates. But then as soon as the interest rates start to move up, then people have less money because a lot of it's being chewed up by the interest principal. And picking the right time, for instance, hospitality at the moment, like 2008, people are paying well overs prior to the GFC. So people are paying way too much for pubs, way too much. Yep. So unless you can buy one that you can really improve on, which a lot of publicans have to and can afford to do, then you shouldn't be doing it. So it's kind of cyclical. I think you'd probably find that in real estate. House prices at the moment are extraordinary. So you shouldn't be selling now and or buying, because if you sell and you're going to buy again, you're selling in the peak of the market. So, you'll get a great deal for your house or residential property, but you're going to be buying one that's probably, you know what I mean, really expensive at the moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely spot on as far as that goes. I know building a bulletproof culture has been a big part of your continued and ongoing success. How do you develop such a strong culture where you create loyalty for life, mate?
When I'm employing people, I basically have lunch with them quite a bit and observe what they're doing. So I'm always sitting there going, okay, what are they ordering? What's their demeanour like? I talk to them about how they, what sports they've played as kids, what their families, do. I really dig deep into everything that they do just to see what their fit would be like in our business, and ask them what has been a tough situation that they've had to work their way out of.
Yeah, it's amazing how people will subtly let their guard down when they're having a feed and reveal things that they don't even realise they're doing. And if you're observant enough and you're asking the right questions, there's an amazing amount of the truth that starts to bubble forward in those situations. Now, one of the other things that I would love your thoughts on, because the hospitality industry generally has come through a really tough time during COVID, when pretty much everything was in lockdown and would have presented some real challenges, I would imagine. How did you sort of work your way through that? What have you learned, and what should others be taking from that whole experience?
I guess the most important thing was having the right team. The second thing was all stakeholders. So we were able to negotiate with our bank, with all of our suppliers, and because we've been good payers, they were happy to help us. So that had a huge significance for us. I'll just give you one small example. One of our signwriters who's been doing our work for years, and in fact, when he started his business, we gave him a lot of work. He came to me when all the pubs were closed and said, "Steve, I know we were planning on changing your signs. How about we do it now, and you can fix me up when things have improved?" And that was just one example of how good our suppliers were. And then also keeping in contact with the general community. So we were constantly we did some family days and community days where we did discounted meals, so that when we reopened, they would send all of their customers and family and friends to our pubs, because they remembered that we were looking after them. And it was kind of, those are the three things. We set up an employee assistance program for our team, so that if they were feeling unwell, they could go and receive some advice from doctors and psychologists, so medical health professionals. So, there was a lot of things that sort of contributed to us sort of coming out on the better side of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You talk a lot in the book about, the link between passion and profit. So I'd love for you to just give us your thoughts on how others can turn their passion into profit and assess the right opportunities for them.
Yeah, well, I guess that comes back to find what you're good at. And, you might be good at something, like you might be a good artist, but it's generally not going to make you a lot of money. So, but there's also in the fact that you like being an artist, that you should try and tap into something that is involved in that industry. You know what I mean? So you may not make a lot of money from your painting or your sculptures, but I'm sure you can sort of find something that is in that industry that you're going to fall as passionate about, and maybe as a side you keep plugging away with your art. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I guess that's the ideal aim: finding something you're good at, and it can make you money. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the direct thing that you're good at. You know, staying in the industry, you'll be far more inquisitive.
Yeah, that inquisitive side of the equation is a key element of what I'm hearing you talk about through your journey. But talking about being inquisitive, I want to sort of shift into what I affectionately call the ambush round, or the bushfire lightning round, where I ask you 4 quick questions on things that the listeners want to glean your wisdom on. So to kick that off, what's your favourite quote and why?
I think my favourite quote is, it's not a weakness to ask for help. The weakness is not to ask for help.
Yeah, that's pretty self-evident. I've always said that the dumbest question is the one that you don't ask. And it's on a similar exercise there, mate. You're absolutely dead right. What about on the literary field, mate? You've written a book now. What would be the top book that you'd recommend we read, and why?
Marcus Aurelius. So that's Stoicism. It's Ryan Halliday has done a summary of that, and I think it's fantastic. It's history just repeats itself, despite the fact that everyone thinks they're better than the last generation. And stuff that's written in 2000 BC is extremely relevant today. You know, there's a few things that have changed, like IT and different things, but generally people are very similar.
Yeah, The Obstacles Away. It's an awesome book, mate. It's on my bookshelf as well. I'm a very avid reader, and there's some really timeless principles that come out of that. And one of the biggest ones for me out of that book is recognising that the challenges that we face are our greatest opportunities for learning and improvement. And you've certainly demonstrated that in our chat today. But back on the investment front then, Stephen, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received today?
Worst is buying something sight unseen. That would be the worst advice. Oh, yeah, it'll be right. I haven't seen it yet. In fact, I did that with a pub recently, and I got all the sales pitch to this and that. And, I was reasonably convinced, and then looked at the site and went, this is nowhere near what they were selling me. The best advice is always, don't ever get in over your head, despite me trying to raise the $1 million that I didn't have. That would be the best advice. Only invest what you can, really. Yeah,
no, spot on, mate. We've talked a little bit about habits and rituals, and you've mentioned some of them during our chat today, but what's one of those personal happy habits, rewarding rituals, or daily disciplines that you employ regularly that's contributed most to your success today?
Reading. Yeah, just an avid reader. Just constantly reading away. I think that's where you get ideas, and that's where you get growth. And also targeted reading. It's interesting, you read one book, which then leads to another book, which then leads to another book, you know what I mean? So reading and then observing what's in those books, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah, totally agree, mate. I carry a Kindle everywhere, and I reckon I've got a library of 300 or 400 books on my Kindle. And what I love about the Kindle is that you're reading a book and it gives you suggestions directly on other books to read that I often would never even become aware of if I hadn't had the Kindle. So totally agree, mate. Continuously fueling the fire and getting you to ask those questions and to break through some of your assumptions is a key way to do that, mate. But look, to summarise our great conversation today, what are your key takeaways and actions that you think the listeners need to embrace?
Well, keep inquisitive, find what you really love doing, and put yourself in the right room. They're the crucial ones for me. And then have a crack at it. There's never the perfect time. So, they're the main things I would do.
Brilliantly said, mate. Now, before we close, I'm just going to share another very quick shameless plug, if you excuse my indulgence here, Stephen, because if you'd like to hear more investment gold on all things investment, join me and all of the industry leaders every week on Realty Talk. And you can do that by just jumping on realty.com.au/channels and subscribing so that you get to enjoy the longest running and most popular property show in the country, and it arrives in your inbox every week. So, mate, as we bring it to a close, what's new and next for you?
Currently looking at a brewery.
Okay.
Only a small one. So if that comes off, that'd be good. But if it doesn't, and then after that, looking forward to school holidays with my boys who are playing on a rugby camp.
Love it, mate. Love that. For those that have really resonated with your message today, mate, how can the listeners find out more or get more involved with you?
I'm pretty easy to find. I've got my own webpage like everyone, but also when they buy the book, jump online and have a read of the book, and there's contact me information. Stay connected at the end of the book.
I love it, mate. Well, I'm actually going to finish with an inspiring extract from your book, Find, Build, Sell, because I really think it sums it up in terms of the key things that we need to take on board today. So you said beautifully that through trial and error, I've discovered a blueprint for business success. And the best part is my blueprint works for any business. Whether you're a hairdresser, a stockbroker, a fashion designer, or car dealer, this system will work for you too. If you live in the real world like I do, and you'd like to learn how you can turn your passion into profit, do what you love and get paid handsomely to do so that you never have to work in a job you hate because the work you do is what you were born to do, then Find, Build, Sell is a book for you. There's never been a better time to make a change. If you are going to do something differently, the time is now. Don't waste another minute doing something you don't want to do for a boss or company that you neither like nor respect, for a wage or conditions that don't reflect your true worth, your talent, and your potential. Don't be an armchair critic. Get out there, throw your hat in the ring, and get cracking. After all, if a left-handed, one-kidney, ginger-haired kid from the back blocks of Sydney can do it, so can you. So, mate, that's a great extract, and I'd like to remind people that it's never too late to start, but it's always too late to wait. So get invested and get started. And you can do that by grabbing yourself a copy of Stephen's book on his website at stephenjhunt.com.au, or you can grab it on Amazon, Booktopia, or any good or bad bookstore. And make sure you mention Bushy when you reach out. Mate, it's been a great chat. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy publicans are, and if you've got 7 to worry about plus an investment fund, then you wouldn't have much spare time in the day. So you've been very generous with that, mate, and I really appreciate your time on the show today.
Thanks, Bushy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Good on you, mate. We'll be in touch. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening. And as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die